1941 barging into Seoul, snatching palace on the huge land that was floating. The floating land was where the imperial city of Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo was located. But then, Luo royal family was exterminated and the imperial city fell into the hands of Seoul Snatching Palace. The lair of Seoul Snatching Palace was set up there as well in order to take control of the entire Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. Although I have no idea what the goal of Holocaust sect was, regardless, I'll just exterminate them straight away. Jian Wushuang overlooked the huge floating land as his eyes glowed with a chilly gleam. Duan Lingfeng, you go first, Jian Wushuang said. No problem. Duan Lingfeng didn't hesitate as he moved towards the huge floating land. Rumble. There was an extremely fierce real god aura that swept out. The real god aura was almost unbelievable among real gods. Who is it? Stop! Someone shouted, and there were suddenly a few figures that burst out. Hearing the shouts, Duan Lingfeng didn't stop his footsteps. Courting death. Someone shouted again. There were a bunch of figures that burst out from Seoul Snatching Seoul and let out fierce auras. There were as many as 6 real gods. In the void afar, Jian Wushuang and the few others stood there and watched quietly. Mister, will we just watch as Mr. Duan barge into Seoul Snatching Palace alone? The purple-haired youth, Luo Qianhong, creased his eyebrows. He already knew what Jian Wushuang's plan was. He was there to exterminate Seoul Snatching Palace. However, Seoul Snatching Palace was a dangerous spot. Mr. Duan had barged in alone. Wouldn't it be extremely dangerous? Don't worry, just watch. Jian Wushuang looked calm. On the floating land, there was an explosion of war. Duan Lingfeng, who was in a white robe, held his saber in one hand and he looked as though he had transformed into a demon. With a billowing massacre aura, the boundless massacre doctrine formed a massacre realm that covered the entire universe. In terms of comprehension of massacre doctrine, Dean Lingfeng had obviously reached the standard of the 7th level of Doctrine Palace. It was already the standard of an almighty. His saber skill was even scarier. No matter how great the number of real god and universe god were there from Seoul Snatching Palace, they were just clay chickens and pottery dogs, completely useless. He had massacred and left behind a sea of blood. There was no one who could withstand his saberlights that he performed with ease. With his power alone, he had barged into the lair of Seoul Snatching Palace and massacred rampantly. This. Luo Qianhong was dumbfounded at the sight. He was shocked at the power displayed by Duan Lingfeng. He's so powerful. Mr. Duan is so powerful. They are real gods, but one casual slash of his saber could kill 3 of them. The higher-ups from Seoul Snatching Palace teamed up and formed a formation to block, but he broke them apart with one slash. He is that powerful? It stirred a great commotion in Luo Qianhong's heart. He had always stayed in Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. He had only wandered in a few other holy kingdoms nearby. Although he had some experience, he wasn't as knowledgeable and experienced. In his eyes, real gods were already high above, especially those who were eternal real gods and chaotic real gods. Especially chaotic real gods. In a normal situation, a chaotic real god could take over a holy kingdom and become a ruler easily. For instance, the strongest person in Luo royal family, monarch of Sky Luo, was only a chaotic real god who was also the strongest person Luo Qianhong had ever seen. But then, Duan Lingfeng's rampant massacre and the power he displayed had exceeded Luo Qianhong's imagination. Those black-robed masked men appeared. Luo Qianhong's heart clenched. He saw that there were dozens of black-robed figures with savage masks who had appeared on the battlefield. Those black-robed masked men were all powerful. The weakest of them was a top eternal real god. Most of them were chaotic real gods. The dozens of them teamed up to hem Duan Lingfeng in. Mr. Duan is in danger. Luo Qianhong was worried. But in the end, vroom. A cold saberlight swept and more than half of the dozens of black-robed masked men were wiped out by the merciless blade light. Then, Duan Lingfeng casually swung his saber at the remaining few. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of black-robed masked men were wiped out. This is too scary. Luo Qianhong stared. Jian Wushuang next to him wasn't surprised at such an outcome. Luo Qianhong, what do you think of my best friend's power? Jian Wushuang suddenly asked. Mr. Duan is the strongest person I have ever seen in saber skill and comprehension of massacre doctrine, Luo Qianhong said in a serious tone. Of course, he is widely acknowledged as the #1 real god in eternal chaotic world. Jian Wushuang smiled and said, #1 real god in eternal world? Luo Qianhong stunned. Although he had never been to 10 cultivation sanctuaries, he knew just how impressive it was to be a #1 real god in eternal world. Of course, they had said that Duan Lingfeng was the #1 real god in eternal world without taking Jian Wushuang into consideration. Because in eternal chaotic world, there was no one who treated Jian Wushuang as a real god anymore. Luo Qianhong, you are also good at saber skills and you are also comprehending massacre doctrine. Don't you want to be his disciple? Jian Wushuang casually asked. Be formally apprenticed to Mr. Duan? Luo Qianhong was stunned and his eyes immediately shimmered. I, of course, want to be formally apprenticed to him. I wonder if Mr. Duan is willing to take me as his disciple. You can give it a try. Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang looked as though he was casually speaking, but Luo Qianhong took his advice seriously. He looked at Duan Lingfeng, who was massacring rampantly, and he made up his mind. Just then, Hong, there was a fierce divine might that suddenly soared. The divine might was high and above, and it instantly engulfed the universe. On the floating land, the cultivators were shivering in fear under such divine might. Some even knelt down straight away. This is... Luo Qianhong looked terrified. There was a malicious smile that spread across Jian Wushuang's face. The cold-looking elder in a black robe was the one who gave out the divine might. When Jian Wushuang saw the cold-looking elder, his gaze was fixed. Someone familiar. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He wondered if it was a coincidence. He had met the cold-looking elder once. It was many years ago. Back when Jian Wushuang was just a stage 2 ultimate real god, it was too difficult for him to accumulate ultimate divine power in his body. Hence, he went to Divine Pond of Absolute Beginning that was controlled by Sir God Luo Shoz under the lead of Sir God Mad Dog. When Jian Wushuang was taking in the power of Absolute Beginning in Divine Pond of Absolute Beginning, the experts from Holocaust sect happened to barge in. Then, there were 4 Sir Gods who came. The cold-looking elder was one of them. In the end, Jian Wushuang, Sir God Mad Dog and Sir God Luo Sho had teamed up to fight off the other 4 Sir Gods. They had even killed His Highness Mu Hong. Now, he had crossed paths with the cold-looking elder again. 1942 The 7th Palace Master. Hong. On the battlefield, Duan Lingfeng was already fighting with the cold-looking elder. Although the cold-looking elder was a Sir God, Duan Lingfeng was #1 on Real God ranking list. He was powerful enough to fight with him. He would definitely not be defeated in a short period of time. Mister, you said that Mr. Duan is the #1 real God in eternal world. The person that is fighting with him now seems to be slightly stronger than him. Could he be the legendary Almighty? Luo Qianhong couldn't help but ask. Yes, an Almighty, Jian Wushuang answered. He really is, Luo Qianhong gasped. To cultivators who stayed in their holy kingdoms all year round, an Almighty was definitely like a figure from the legend. Mr. Duan, who is only a real god, can fight with a legendary Almighty like that. He lives up to his reputation as the #1 real god in eternal world, Luo Qianhong complimented. Jian Wushuang, let's fight. Otherwise, your best friend might not be able to endure for long, King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. King of Venomous Worms immediately moved and returned to Jian Wushuang's body. Qiu Yu, stay on the spaceship with this young man, Jian Wushuang exhorted. Yes, Qiu Yu nodded. Then, Jian Wushuang and Jian Yi flew to the huge floating land. Just as they landed on the land, rumble. A terrifying divine might flowed out of Jian Wushuang's body. The power of the divine might was stronger by tens of folds than the full divine might shown by the cold-looking elder. The divine might was like a prison as it engulfed the entire land. The cultivators on the land, including the men from Soul Snatching Palace, were terrified. With such terrifying divine might, it finally startled the expert who was hidden in the deepest place of the land. Then, there were fierce auras that burst out from the depth of the land, also known as the old lair of Soul Snatching Palace. A few figures appeared one after another. They gathered with the cold-looking elder. There was a total of 7 figures floating in the air. Just like 7 gods. So many of them? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew that there were experts from Holocaust sect within Soul-Snatching Palace, and there might even be almighties. However, he had never expected that in Soul-Snatching Palace itself, they hid a total of 7 almighties. Most importantly, among the 7 almighties, there were not only Sir Gods. There were only 4 Sir Gods, and the other 3 were Emperor Gods. 3 Emperor Gods and 4 Sir Gods, that was the powerful team formation in front of Jian Wushuang. Among the 3 Emperor Gods, the one leading was a golden-robed man with a crimson monstrous mask. The golden-robed masked man stood there and pressed down on Jian Wushuang with pressure. Without a doubt, the golden-robed masked man was a true peak Emperor God. Interesting. Such a minor force like Soul-Snatching Palace is impressive enough to contain 7 gods. There's even a peak Emperor Gods. Jian Wushuang smiled. His smile was cold like a blade. The 7 almighties stared at Jian Wushuang. The pair of eerie golden eyes that were revealed by the golden-robed masked men were looking at Jian Wushuang as he let out boundless resentment. "You are Jian Wushuang." The golden-robed man sounded cold and the air froze in an instant. "You know me? It seems that I am quite famous in Holocaust sect." Jian Wushuang rubbed his nose. "I'm the 7th Palace Master of Holocaust sect." The golden-robed masked man stared at Jian Wushuang as murderous intentions swept out. "Jian Wushuang, I finally found you. Give me my son back." Jian Wushuang was stunned. "Your son? Could it be His Highness Mu Hong?" Although Jian Wushuang had crossed paths with Holocaust sect multiple times, the only expert from Holocaust sect that died had at his hand was His Highness Mu Hong. Plus, Jian Wushuang had always thought that His Highness Mu Hong had a background. From what it seemed, he should be his father, the golden-robed masked man before him. With a peak Emperor God as his father, no wonder His Highness Mu Hong would be so arrogant. Jian Wushuang sneered. "Save your nonsense. I will take revenge on my son's behalf today." The golden-robed masked man bellowed, and his peak Emperor God aura instantly locked onto Jian Wushuang as his target. His body immediately increased tremendously in size to 10 jong tall. His golden robe turned into boundless golden clouds. Rumble. A huge golden mountain appeared in the sky above. The golden mountain continuously magnified and pressed down on everything in the universe. That very moment, it pressed down on Jian Wushuang. Looking at the golden mountain above him, Jian Wushuang's eyes dilated in shock. As the golden mountain pressed on him, he could clearly feel a suppressing power. If not mistaken, the golden mountain should be a suppressing treasure that was rare. Plus, the power had reached the level of chaotic divine treasure. Chaotic divine treasure is rare to begin with. A suppressing chaotic divine treasure is even harder to come by, Jian Wushuang muttered. Even he felt danger approaching when he was under the golden mountain. "My 7 stars are all broken. My power of ancient tribe bloodline has just recovered by a slight bit, and my power isn't at its peak. I am at a disadvantage when I am fighting with the 7th Palace Master who is suppressing chaotic divine treasure." Jian Wushuang thought and immediately looked at Jian Yi next to him. "Take care of this person. Kill him," Jian Wushuang commanded. "Yes." Jian Yi nodded politely, and there was immediately a crimson cloud churning on his body. There was crimson fog that gathered in the sky and instantly formed a crimson ocean to engulf the entire huge golden mountain. The golden mountain displayed its power that was fierce. However, when it hit the crimson ocean, it as though it had hit a ball of cotton. "What?" The golden masked man, also the 7th Palace Master, couldn't help but steal a glance at Jian Yi. However, Jian Yi didn't stop, and his figure grew illusionary and charged towards the 7th Palace Master. "Humph." The 7th Palace Master humphed coldly. When Jian Yi got closer, he took out a huge seal with a flip of his wrist. On the huge seal, there was a golden dragon that carried a powerful aura. It was an extremely unique, chaotic divine treasure. As the 7th Palace Master patted the seal let out an intense golden glow. The golden dragon on the seal instantly became alive. Roar! A terrifying dragon roar reverberated in the universe. The golden dragon suddenly became tens of thousands of zhong in length. It contained boundless imposing power as it charged at Jian Yi. The golden dragon gave Jian Wushuang a feeling that it could match evenly with an ordinary peak emperor god. This seventh palace master has so many treasures on hand? Jian Wushuang was shocked. 1943. Unaware of the aureole behind from the golden mountain to the golden dragon seal, the seventh palace master took out 2 golden spears. The 2 golden spears carried extraordinary aura as well. They were also chaotic divine treasure. He really had a lot of treasure with him. Treasures are great, but in terms of his power, he is only an emperor god after all. He would at most be similar to Palace Wu Luo from Abysmal Palace. Even with the assistance of the treasure, he definitely wasn't Jian Yi's match. Jian Wushuang sneered when he looked at the other 6 almighties nearby. Jian Yi could take care of the 7th palace master, but these other 6. There was a flash of murderous intention in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Then, 4 Hongjung golden swords soared up at the same time. They instantly became 4 resplendent golden lights. The 4 golden lights were unbelievably fast as they flew at the 6 almighties. Kill him. The 6 almighties were soaring with murderous intention. There was no fear in them. They immediately let their power into full play and fought with Jian Wushuang. Although the 6 of them had teamed up, their powers were vastly different from Jian Wushuang's. Jian Wushuang only drove the 4 Hongjun golden swords to attack rampantly, and he killed 4 Sir gods at lightning speed. As for the remaining 2 emperor gods who had ordinary fighting powers, they didn't last long either before they were killed by Jian Wushuang. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang's body floated in the void, and the 4 Hongjun golden sword returned to his sides as he looked down at the 6 dead bodies on the ground. However, he was shocked. One should know that the 6 almighties were obviously not his match. They would totally be suppressed if they fought with him. However, the 6 almighties had no intention to retreat even though they knew so. There was only madness that wanted to kill him. Almighties, every single one of that went through so much. They should look highly upon their lives. However, the 6 of them seem to have put their lives aside. What is going on? Jian Wushuang muttered. Not only the 6 almighties, but Jian Wushuang also noticed that the 7th palace master who was fighting with Jian Yi was the same. He had played all his trump cards and he was still suppressed by Jian Yi. Theoretically, at such a crucial moment, he should run for his life. But in actual fact, he had no intention to flee. Just then, humph! The 7th palace master suddenly humphed coldly and the aura on his body suddenly increased at a terrifying speed. This is soul ignition. Jian Wushuang's face suddenly changed. He wasn't unfamiliar with soul ignition. Back when he had invited Colored Glaze Emperor God and Emperor God Ju Yin to Deluge Fortress, when they had besieged Fortress Master Hong Qian, he had been cornered into a desperate situation and he performed soul ignition and swore to counterattack. But in the end, Jian Wushuang and his troops had killed him. Once one soul was ignited, his overall power would increase tremendously in a short period of time. However, the price to pay was definite death. Only an expert who was above peak Emperor God could pull off that move. If one wasn't at a final desperate situation, no one would do so. Then, although the 7th palace master was cornered by Jian Yi, he would stand no chance to flee with all the treasures and trump cards that he had. But he soul ignited to counterattack without hesitation? He's mad! Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Jian Wushuang, I want you dead. The mask on the 7th palace master shattered and revealed an old, ugly face. The face was then distorted and ferocious looking. Because of soul ignition, the power that he let out had reached a brand new level. In collaboration with the treasures he had, his fighting power was extraordinary. Jian Yi, block him! Jian Wushuang roared. Jian Yi naturally wouldn't hesitate to go forward and fight a fierce battle. Plus, he put his full power on display. Bang! 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 There was continuous explosions that resounded in the universe. The sky was filled with divine power and the floating land quivered madly. Luckily, there were countless cultivators on the land that fled far away. Otherwise, the battle could destroy everything on land. There was another explosion, and the floating land shattered into pieces entirely. Jian Wushuang! Jian Wushuang! An angry roar reverberated in the universe. The hysterical roar brought about boundless madness and unwillingness. This man. Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze at the seventh palace master solemnly as his face grew distressed. He felt glad that he had brought Jian Yi with him. The seventh palace master couldn't break through Jian Yi's guard and come before him even if his soul ignited. But, if he was alone, his power of 7-star had yet to recover. There were many trump cards that he had yet to perform. If he were to fight against the seventh palace master at such a crucial moment, he might really be in danger. Time flew past. After a while, the seventh palace master's consciousness started fleeing along with his ignited soul. They started to disperse. After a while, the seventh palace master's aura finally vanished into thin air and he died. Is he dead? Jian Wushuang let out a breath of relief. Oh yeah, his treasure. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed. The seventh palace master had many treasures. He immediately wanted to go forward. Suddenly, just as he approached the seventh palace master's dead body, the surrounding dark void suddenly shattered. Then, a ghostly figure leaped out from the broken void. Then, she waved and took the seventh palace master's dead body along with his Qian Kuan ring and his treasures. Courting death. Jian Wushuang grew distressed and the 4 Hongjun golden sword burst out. Jian Yi, who was near to the seventh palace master's dead body, plunged forward as well. The ghostly figure smirked coldly and dodged. Her body moved to somewhere far away. The 4 Hongjun golden swords and Jian Yi's attack missed. Sword Emperor, don't be angry, there was a soft voice. The person steadied herself and it was an old lady in black robe. Although she was only a Sir God, she gave Jian Wushuang a strange feeling. Forget about the others. The old lady in the black robe had been hiding in the surrounding dark void for so long, but both Jian Wushuang and Jian Yi didn't notice her at all. She shouldn't be belittled by that factor alone. Who are you? Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold as he looked at the old lady in the black robe. It doesn't matter who I am. Sword Emperor, you only need to know that I come at my master's command. My master's surname is Lung. Sword Emperor should know her. The old lady in black robe smiled as she spoke. Jian Wushuang's body stiffened at her speech. Surname Lung? Lord Lung. Jian Wushuang's gaze was turned cold. Lord Lung? No, my master is no longer the Lord but Holocaust Sect Master. 1944 Holocaust Sect Master? Sect Master? Jian Wushuang's face grew in distress. He heard from Emperor Bai earlier that Holocaust Sect had gone through a drastic change. Someone united them using thunderous measures. However, he had never expected the one who united Holocaust Sect would be Lang Rushue. Speaking of which, Holocaust Sect has to thank Sword Emperor for helping Holocaust Sect to take care of these betrayers. Otherwise, Holocaust Sect has to use time and effort to deal with them. The old lady in black robe smiled. Jian Wushuang glanced at the few Almighty's dead bodies around him and he understood then. No wonder the experts from Holocaust Sect had decided to maintain high profile. They didn't even flee when they saw him coming but opted to fight a life-and-death battle. From what it seemed, these people already betrayed Holocaust Sect and they were eyed by Lang Rushue. If he wasn't not mistaken, there should have been marks on their bodies long ago. They had never fled. In other words, they were actually dead for sure. They were only waiting for Holocaust Sect to kill them. It was just that Holocaust Sect had yet to take action, but they had met Jian Wushuang. Sword Emperor, for what happened today, I thank you on behalf of my master. Farewell. The old lady in black robe smiled maliciously as her figure suddenly became blurry. Want to leave? Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold and there was a purple bead in his hand. Under Jian Wushuang's manipulation of his will, vroom. Boundless purple light covered the light. In an instant, it formed a formation that covered a range of few millions miles. One realm pearl became formation at one's will. You can't run away. Jian Wushuang's voice resounded in the air. I knew Sword Emperor has a treasure that turned into formation at your will. As I dare to take away the treasures in front of you, I naturally am well prepared. The old lady in the black robe smiled faintly. She flipped her hand and took out a token. The token broke and instantly shattered the void. There was a space tunnel that appeared from nowhere. What? Jian Wushuang was surprised. The formation that One Realm Pearl formed covered the entire spacetime. But the token that he had taken out could ignore the spacetime and form a space tunnel that connected to the outside world in such situation. Humph! Jian Wushuang let out a cold humph and the divine power in his body flowed. At the same time, there was also minor power of ancient tribe bloodline that King of Venomous Worms barely recovered. Although his power of ancient tribe bloodline had only recovered by a slight bit, it was barely enough. Moon-picking skill. There was soaring divine power. Rumble. The spacetime that the old lady in the black robe was in immediately faced unprecedented pressure. The spacetime tunnel that appeared in the air started to distort from the pressure. SHT. The old lady in the black robe's face grew grave. Just then, from the spacetime tunnel that was distorted, Kwong, there was a lily-white hand that extended. The lily-white hand was clean without any flaw. At the same time, there was a cold aura that spread out from the other side of spacetime tunnel that Jian Wushuang could never forget in his lifetime. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed when he sensed the aura. Lang Rushue. Jian Wushuang glared at the spacetime tunnel. The lily-white hand that extended from the spacetime tunnel only moved casually, and the spacetime that had been pressured earlier instantly settled down and the spacetime tunnel resumed normal. The old lady in the black robe seized the chance to enter the spacetime tunnel and disappeared. The spacetime tunnel then started to close gradually. Right before the spacetime tunnel disappeared, there was suddenly a voice. He, Jian Wushuang, I never expected you to have the chance to reach where you are now. It's a pity that you are still far from saving her. Very far. Ha ha. There was a taint of disdain in her voice and it reverberated in Jian Wushuang's ears. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands and watched the spacetime tunnel disappear. His body quivered faintly. He felt extremely solemn from the bottom of his heart. Very far, what she said repeatedly rang in his head. With my power now, is it still not enough? Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth. Ever since he had left Green Fire World until then, it had been tens of thousands of years. He had been trying his best to increase his power and find ways to make himself stronger. No matter what kind of danger he faced, he would fight for a string of hope with his all. He did all that so that he could find Leng Ruxia one day and save her wife Leng Rushuang. After so many years, he had though his improvement speed was shocking enough. Especially then, when he already stood on the peak of eternal chaotic world, even the great emperors held scruples with him. However, he realized then that he was still not powerful enough. He was far from enough. Holocaust Sect is a hidden dark force that could match evenly with Sanctuary Alliance. Its overall power might not win over Sanctuary Alliance, but they shouldn't be too far apart. But she could unite Holocaust Sect and become Holocaust Sect Master with thunderous measure. Such power. Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn. Besides, the lily-white hand that extended from the spacetime tunnel earlier must have been Lang Rushue's. However, from the lily-white hand alone, although Jian Wushuang couldn't determine her true power, he was determined that Leng Ruxia must have reached the stage on par with Great Emperor. How could she improve so quickly? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Although a primordial great sinner has advantage in cultivation, she shouldn't have reached the level of Great Emperor in only tens of thousands of years. From what I see, she definitely received an impressive opportunity. King of Venomous Worms' voice rang in Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang nodded in silence. He obviously thought it was the only explanation as well. Jian Wushuang, don't be in a hurry. She received a great opportunity and became a great emperor in a short time. You are not too shabby yourself. Plus, you already received the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. You only need some time until you leap to the 7th step. By then, you should be able to fight with her. You are definitely not far from possessing power enough to suppress her, King of Venomous Worms reassured. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily and he was confident too. Swoosh! Swoosh! There were two figures that appeared next to Jian Wushuang. Master! Jian Yi looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, are you okay? Duan Lingfeng asked. I'm okay, Jian Wushuang shook his head. the Almighties from Holocaust sect are wiped out. The remaining are just some real gods and some people from Soul-Snatching Palace. Kill them all. Jian Wushuang was boiling with murderous intention. He waved and 4 bronze-armored Dao soldiers appeared simultaneously. In addition to Du and Lingfeng, Jian Yi, and himself, they massacred the experts from Soul-Snatching Palace mercilessly. 1945. Taking in a disciple without Almighties, the remaining experts from Holocaust sect and Soul-Snatching Palace naturally had no space to struggle when they were fighting against Jian Wushuang and his troop. In a short while, the entire Soul-Snatching Palace was exterminated. Only some extremely weak disciples managed to escape. In the vast void. Your name is Luo Qianhong, right? Du and Lingfeng's gaze was cold as he stared at the purple-haired young man in front of him. Yes, Luo Qianhong nodded solemnly as his eyes filled with enthusiasm. I arranged an opponent for you. If you can defeat him, I will take you in as a registered disciple. However, if you can't kill your opponent, you can only blame yourself. I will not help you, Du and Lingfeng said coldly. Registered disciple? Luo Qianhong licked his lips. He had already seen Du and Lingdeng's power. Although he wasn't as scary as Jian Wushuang, he was still a superb existence that made him passionate. To be able to be formally apprenticed to a superb existence, even though he was just a registered disciple, it was worthy for Luo Qianhong to fight for it. He is my opponent? Luo Qianhong looked at the brawny man in front of him. The brawny man's face was like a grave, covered in hopelessness. However, the aura he carried reached the level of a peak void real god. A universe god had to fight with a top void real god and had to kill him. That was quite challenging. However, for a true top genius, it was doable. Forget about the others. At least Jian Wushuang and Du and Lingfeng could do that when they were universe gods. Listen up, Du and Lingfeng looked at the brawny man. I'll give you a string of hope. Fight with your all. As long as you can kill your opponent, you can live. If not, die. The brawny man from Soul-Snatching Palace originally felt hopeless. However, when he heard what Du and Lingfeng had said, his eyes glowed. He stared at Luo Qianhong and an unprecedented murderous intention and hope of life soared. The power that a person had during his final crucial moment was the scariest. Let's begin, Du and Lingfeng said coldly. The two of them immediately fought in the void. One of them wanted to be formally apprenticed to Du and Lingfeng. The other merely wanted to survive. Both exploded their strongest fighting power. At the border of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang and Du and Lingfeng stood side by side. To have this young man fight with a top void real god, and the match will be called with life and death. Only you could think of such an idea, Jian Wushuang said. He wants to be my disciple. How could it be so simple? Plus, the opponent that I assigned to him is evenly matched after all. It couldn't be considered as unfair, Du and Lingfeng said coldly. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows but didn't say much. After all, it was Du and Lingfeng picking his disciple, not him. In the void, the battle between a universe god and a real god lasted for very long. Both parties have firm beliefs and were extremely mad in the fight. In the end, it became a competition of all power and endurance. Finally, the outcome of the match was out. The one who survived until the end was Luo Qianhong. He stood in the void as his figure quivered. He was covered in blood and his face was pale, but his eyes were shimmering with joy. In front of him was the dead body of the brawny man. I won. Luo Qianhong was excited. The blood in his body was boiling too. The battle could be considered as a transformation to this young man. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly as he watched. Not too shabby. Du and Lingfeng nodded faintly. Luo Qianhong defeated his opponent. According to what Du and Lingfeng had said earlier, he had taken him in as his registered disciple. Then, Luo Qianhong left with Du and Lingfeng. As for Jian Wushuang and his troop, they left Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo as well. On their way out, Jian Wushuang sent a message to Purple Moon Emperor and informed him about the ins and outs. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to hide anything, but he kept the relationship between himself and the Holocaust sect master, Lang Rushue, a secret. It seems that the news that Sanctuary Alliance got isn't false, Purple Moon Emperor exclaimed, not long ago. Although Holocaust sect master united Holocaust sect using thunderous measures, there are still many within Holocaust sect that aren't willing to follow their sect master's command. They are considered betrayers. Holocaust sect has been wiping out these traitors all this while. As for the 7th Palace Master, Sanctuary Alliance knew about him. Previously, Holocaust sect held great power and an eminent position. It's a pity that he wasn't on the same side with Holocaust sect master. Hence, after Holocaust sect master attacked, he brought a bunch of experts and fled. At the same time, he seemed to have brought along some treasures that Holocaust sect collected. It's a pity that these treasures didn't fall into your hands but were taken away by Holocaust sect master. Jian Wushuang clearly understood when he heard that. Jian Wushuang, eternal chaotic world isn't peaceful. Holocaust sect and Akron Palace are preparing to launch an attack. I reckon it wouldn't be long until they make a big movement again. Before that, you have to focus on cultivation and seize the time to break through and become an almighty. You are an inverse cultivator. As soon as you become an almighty, you will be compared to a great emperor favorably. By then, you can be one of the highest fighting powers of Sanctuary Alliance. This is the most important task for you now, Purple Moon Emperor said. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. He also knew what was most important to him then. To step foot on the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, breakthrough, and become an almighty should be the most important task on hand. Return to Green Fire World. The spiritual power is the most intense there. I will get the best result if I cultivate there, Jian Wushuang decided. An ancient silver spaceship immediately flew in the direction of Green Fire World. They passed through some space-time wormholes along the way. Jian Wushuang then arrived at Green Fire World in no time. Jian Wushuang had only left Green Fire World for a few thousand years. But in the few thousand years, there had been a drastic change in Green Fire World. Firstly, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth. A few thousand years ago, before Jian Wushuang left, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth in Green Fire World already far beyond 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Then, after a few thousand years of evolution, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth in Green Fire World and the overall cultivation environment was at least tens of times stronger than 10 cultivation sanctuaries. It was merely a conservative estimation that Jian Wushuang did. Jian Wushuang even thought the cultivation environment in Green Fire World could compare favorably with the first era. Even though there was a distance, it wasn't big. In such an outstanding cultivation environment, Green Fire World's cultivators naturally improved rather quickly under Jian Wushuang's guidance. Then, the number of universe gods in Green Fire World had more than tens of thousands of people. There was even more than 10 real gods. 1946 12,000 years, it has only been a few thousand years. Jian Wushuang exclaimed in surprise. In the small Green Fire World, the number of cultivators was far less than in other worlds. However, the experts in Green Fire World were about the same compared to an ordinary Holy Kingdom. Plus, Green Fire World continued to evolve and it was improving at a shocking speed. Especially when Jian Wushuang came, he had brought complete guidance from real God to almighty level. In all aspects and a variety of them. He had brought back enormous resources. Jian Wushuang prepared all of that for Green Fire World when he was in Lineage of Star. If the guidance in Green Fire World was only to reach real God level, at most it could give birth to real God. Then, Green Fire World possessed the ability to give birth to an almighty. Not only Sir Gods, but also Emperor Gods. Green Fire World could give birth to them, but they needed time. Besides, after Jian Wushuang returned from Lineage of Star, he improved Wushuang City at the first instant. Then, he left behind richer resources and opportunities in Wushuang City. After that, Wushuang City became a true land of opportunity. As long as one was powerful and lucky enough, they would receive great opportunity in Wushuang City. I have prepared whatever I have to prepare. I tried my best to perfect the cultivation environment in Green Fire World. Now, it depends on how hardworking the juniors in Green Fire World are. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He foresaw that in another few thousand years or tens of thousands of years, Green Fire World would be well developed and there would be countless experts sparring. Previously, Jian Wushuang had thought that Green Fire World would only possess the potential of becoming a new sanctuary in eternal chaotic world. However, from what it seemed, it wasn't just that. After that, Jian Wushuang started cultivating in seclusion in Wushuang City as well. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged. King of venomous worms, for the rest of this time, I have to depend on you, Jian Wushuang smiled. I'll take care of it, King of venomous worms nodded. The environment in Green Fire World is outstanding. It will be easier to recover your power of ancient tribe bloodline. With my ability, I should be able to fully recover your power of ancient tribe bloodline in 5,000 years. 5,000 years. Jian Wushuang was very contented with that. One should know that when his 6 stars broke, King of venomous worms had taken almost 7,000 years to fix it. Then, he only needed 5,000 years, which was much shorter comparatively. The power of ancient tribe bloodline would be passed to King of venomous worms while Jian Wushuang fully concentrated on studying the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. The 7th step of inverse cultivation skill was also the level of an almighty. In ancient times, it was called chaotic realm. As an inverse cultivator, the current stage was known as chaotic supreme. The realm was similar but the disposition was different. Every single step an inverse cultivator took was different from the others. Every single step taken was entirely different from an ordinary cultivator's. For instance, at real god level, just how scary was an inverse cultivator as ultimate real god? Jian Wushuang had been gifted with divine power and a divine body that were comparable favorably with an emperor god at his 3rd stage ultimate real god level. Hence, he could perform such terrifying fighting power at real god level. The 7th step of an inverse cultivator, chaotic supreme, was different from chaotic realm of an ordinary cultivator. There was naturally a huge difference. As for where the difference was, Jian Wushuang had never reached that level. So, he didn't know. I have reached the extreme limit of ultimate real God, my substantive soul has formed and my comprehension of doctrine has reached the requirements. In other words, I have fulfilled all prerequisites to break through from real God to Almighty. Next, the only thing left is an opportunity. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and started cultivating. He didn't know how long he needed to break through, but he couldn't be in a hurry. He had to wait patiently. For the rest of the time, Jian Wushuang had been cultivating. Time was merciless and it flew past. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had cultivated for 12,000 years in Wushuang City. 12,000 years wasn't long to many almighties in eternal chaotic world. On the contrary, it was a fairly short time. There were many immortals who cultivated in seclusion for at least 100,000 years or even hundreds of thousands of years. However, to Jian Wushuang, 12,000 years was the longest period he had cultivated for. Although it had been man years, he didn't intend to exit seclusion. During the 12,000 years, regardless of if it was Lineage of Star or Green Fire World, it was very peaceful. Lineage of Star had gained a steady footing as the #1 force in Sanctuary Alliance. With Jian Wushuang serving as a deterrent force, all forces in Sanctuary Alliance didn't seem to have anyone who dared to challenge Lineage of Star. With such a position, Lineage of Star developed extremely quickly. Their overall power had been stronger and their foundation became firmer too. As for Green Fire World, just like Jian Wushuang had expected, the speed of growth was terrifying. In merely 12,000 years, Green Fire World's overall power already reached a brand new level. There were more than 100 real gods and there were countless universe gods. It was a pity that there had yet to be any almighties. Jian Wushuang also knew that with the assistance of an outstanding environment and abundant resources, it wouldn't be difficult for Green Fire World to give birth to Universe God and Real God, or even Chaotic Real God could be nurtured much easier. However, for Almighty was different from Real God after all. Green Fire World had the ability to nurture an Almighty. However, to give birth to an Almighty in a short period of time, it was still quite impossible. He reckoned that it would at least require continuous nurturing for 20,000 years until Green Fire World give birth to an Almighty. In 100,000 years, Green Fire World should be barely comparable with a sanctuary in Eternal Chaotic World. However, it would be unrealistic if Green Fire World wanted to continue to nurture in peace for another 100,000 years. On the huge ancient battlefield, there was a huge head lying there in silence. The huge head was boundless. Green Fire World was located at the core of the head, it was merely a small dot on the head. At that very moment, there was a malicious-looking young man who appeared on the head. The malicious-looking young man was Emperor God Xianxia. Emperor God Xianxia had arrived at the battlefield over 12,000 years ago through the hidden space gap. Then, he had been wandering in the battlefield. Until then, it was already over 12,000 years. During the 12,000 years, he clearly knew how great the value of the ancient battlefield he was at was. Forget about the rest, in just 12,000 years, he obtained various kinds of opportunities. With the opportunities, his power had increased tremendously. 1947 Cultivator? So magical. The ancient battlefield is too magical, Emperor God Xianxia muttered. After he had wandered in the ancient battlefield for over 12,000 years, he knew the place better. There was no doubt that the ancient battlefield was more precious than the ancient mystery land. Not only because it was an ancient battlefield, it was much broader and vast than ancient mystery land. There were more opportunities as well. Most importantly, there was no one else wandering in the ancient battlefield. For instance, the ancient mystery land had opened countless times in the second era, let alone the first era. Countless times of opening, and large numbers of experts would search for opportunities each time. Hence, many opportunities had been unearthed. Those that had yet to be revealed should be hard to obtain by others as well. However, the ancient battlefield was entirely different. Boundless opportunities contained were completely on display, and there were too many opportunities around. It's a pity that I am weaker in power and my defense power isn't strong enough. There are many places with great opportunities, but I dare not wander. Otherwise, I could achieve even more. Emperor God Xianxia clenched his hands. He was very careful, very cautious. Once he noticed that something was not right, he would immediately leave. He'd rather not get the opportunity than taking a bigger risk. Because he was cautious, he had survived for over 12,000 years. Otherwise, the ancient battlefield that contained huge dangers would have killed him many times. Emperor God Xianxia thought. Just then, Emperor God Xianxia was surprised. He suddenly noticed the few auras within his soul power's sensory range. These are cultivators? Emperor God Xianxia was shocked. He thought that there was no one who knew the ancient battlefield and there was only him alone who had the advantage. But then, he noticed other cultivators on the ancient battlefield. Although the few cultivators were not powerful. Let's take a look first. Emperor God Xianxia squinted his eyes as he moved in the direction of the few cultivators. In the void, there were 4 figures flying forward slowly. There was a mixture of men and women. They looked really young and they were only giving out Universe God auras. The one leading them was a brown-haired young man who was Universe God in the 3rd heaven. We are reaching Purple Flame Realm soon. Be careful. Remember what Master said, the brown-haired young man urged. The other 3 people nodded faintly and there was a tinge of excitement in their eyes. The 4 of them were from Green Fire World. They were cultivators that came for training in the ancient battlefield. They were also from the same sect. Green Fire World then was different from before. There were many real gods and also universe gods. There were so many cultivators who wandered in the surrounding battlefield looking for opportunity. It was naturally much easier to find opportunities on the battlefield. For instance, on the skull where Green Fire World was located, there was more than half of the territory that Green Fire World had probed and found more mystery land. Purple Flame Realm was one of them. Purple Flame Realm has a total of 3 levels. The danger on the first level is enough to kill many universe gods. As for the second levels, it is simply courting death if a universe god enters. Even when our master enters the second level, he has to be cautious and not reckless. As for the third level, the third level of Purple Flame Realm, in the entire Green Fire World, only the legendary Wushuang City Master could go in. Anyone else, including our masters or even our master's master, will definitely die once they enter. The brown-haired young man looked at the other 3 universe gods. The 4 of us can only challenge the first level in Purple Flame Realm at most, and we have to be extremely careful. As for the second level, don't even think about it. Understand? Yes, Senior Qing Hao. The other 3 nodded simultaneously. The four of them were chatting casually, but they didn't know that their conversation was being eavesdropped on by Emperor God Xiexin, who was hidden in the dark. For universe gods from the same sect? In their conversation earlier, they brought up about Purple Flame Realm and also Green Fire World. Emperor God Xiexin had creased his eyebrows earlier. He had heard, and he instantly knew that Purple Flame Realm would be a unique place in the surrounding battlefield. The four universe gods should be wandering in Purple Flame Realm. However, Green Fire World. Emperor God Xiexin didn't understand. Regardless, I'll know when I ask. Emperor God Xiexin smirked coldly and immediately walked forward. The four universe gods went in the direction where Purple Flame Realm was, under the brown-haired young man's lead. But suddenly, Emperor God Xiexin, who was malicious-looking, blocked their way. The four universe gods immediately stopped and four pairs of eyes fixed upon Emperor God Xiexin. This person. The brown-haired young man's eyes dilated in shock. Although Emperor God Xiexin before him didn't give out much aura, the brown-haired young man still felt extremely pressured. The pressure was much stronger than when he faced his own master. The brown-haired young man took a deep breath and immediately bowed. Greetings, Senior. I'm Junior Qinghao. The brown-haired young man beckoned and bowed at Emperor God Xiexin. Immortal Palace was one of the top 9 major forces in Green Fire World. They were very famous. The brown-haired young man, Qinghao, should be a big figure in Immortal Palace. Theoretically, as long as the other person was experienced in Green Fire World, they should have heard of his name. However, Emperor God Xiexin blinked and seemed confused. He had been in Eternal Chaotic World for so long, but he had never heard of a sect named Immortal Palace. I have something I'd like to ask you. Emperor God Xiexin looked at the four of them in front of him. Yes, Senior. The four of us will tell you everything we know. Qinghao seemed rather calm. I heard your conversation earlier, and you talked about Green Fire World and also Immortal Palace that you brought up yourself. I wonder if you could tell me in detail? Emperor God Xiexin smiled and asked. Senior, you don't know about Green Fire World or Immortal Palace? Qinghao stared and he suddenly put his guard up. The other 3 disciples from Immortal Palace looked terrified as well. If the other party didn't know about Immortal Palace, it might be understandable. After all, Immortal Palace was established after the drastic change in Green Fire World. It had only been less than 20,000 years. Those who cultivate in seclusion most of the time during the year, it was normal if they didn't know about them. However, he didn't even know about Green Fire World. Obviously, he wasn't an expert from Green Fire World. Master, I met a mysterious expert on the ancient battlefield. He is from outside Green Fire World. Qinghao didn't move, but he sent a message to his master in secret. 1948 Emperor God Xiexin rejoiced with wild excitement. Qinghao responded at the first instant. However, when he tried to send a message, what happened? My message can't go through? Qinghao was shocked. Then, Emperor God Xiexin had already seen through Qinghao's actions. He sneered, young man, don't even think about sending messages. It's useless. I have already sealed off this space-time. With just 4 universe gods, you can't possibly break it. Don't even think about running away either. Then, there was pressing stress soaring from Emperor Xiexin's body. Putong. 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 The 4 disciples from Immortal Palace, including the brown-haired young man, Qinghao, knelt down straight away. Their heads were buzzing and they couldn't come back to reality for quite some time. Finally, Qinghao was the first one who recovered. He clenched his teeth as he glared at Emperor God Xiexin. He understood that the opponent was far beyond their match. Forget about themselves, even their masters or masters' masters weren't his match. In other words, it was true when the opponent said that the 4 of them couldn't escape. The 4 of you, answer my questions. I may let you go. Emperor God Xiexin smiled maliciously. Dream on. Qinghao humphed coldly. He knew that the opponent was from outside Green Fire World and he had wicked ideas in his mind. He naturally wasn't willing to cooperate. He, a person of integrity. Emperor God Xiexin scoffed and pointed casually with his fingertip. There was a light that burst out and instantly pierced the head of the favored one from Immortal Palace. Then, his aura vanished into thin air. Brother Qinghao. The other three next to him looked distressed. As your senior has died, it's your turn now. Answer my questions honestly or die like your senior did. Make your own choice. Emperor God Xiexin's voice was cold. With his measure of an Emperor God expert, three universe gods who were inexperienced naturally couldn't withstand it. They immediately gave him all the answers that he wanted on a silver platter. Green Fire World is a big world? After finding out about Green Fire World, even Emperor God Xiexin was shocked. The ancient battlefield that he was in had never had any other cultivators but him alone wandering there. But then, he had realized that there was a big world in the ancient battlefield, and the big world seemed to be nurtured from the battlefield. A big world that was nurtured from the ancient battlefield. Just how terrifyingly valuable was the world? That's not right. Emperor God Xiexin shook his head. The spiritual influence of heaven and earth here in the ancient battlefield is so much more intense. The cultivation environment was much more outstanding than the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. On top of that, the ancient battlefield is a land of opportunities. Just how strong were the experts from Green Fire World? Emperor God Xiexin became alert at the first instant. With such outstanding cultivation environment, the overall power of a cultivator shouldn't be any weaker. Who is the strongest person in Green Fire World? How strong is he? Emperor God Xiexin asked straightforwardly. One of the disciples from Immortal Palace answered, the strongest person in Green Fire World is naturally the Wushuang City Master. He built Wushuang City himself and it is no doubt the #1 sanctuary. Countless experts fought to cultivate in Wushuang City. However, rules applied. Although Green Fire World has 9 top forces, none of the 9 top forces dare to go against Wushuang City Master's command. He is widely acknowledged as the strongest one. As for Wushuang City Master's power, no one knew. We only knew that our masters, or even our master's master, said that they aren't Wushuang Master's match. At which level are your master and your master's master at? Emperor God Xiexin continued to question them. Our master is a void real god. As for our master's master, the master of Immortal Palace, he was an eternal real god, the top eternal real god. The disciple from Immortal Palace answered honestly. Emperor God Xiexin heard the disciple from Immortal Palace's answer and he was surprised. The palace master of one of the 9 top forces is only an eternal real god. How could he be so weak? Emperor God Xiexin was confused, but then he finally understood after a round of questions. Ha ha, I see. It turned out that Green Fire World had only started evolving in the past 10,000 years. The cultivation environment here was terrible. They didn't even have any universe gods. Then, somehow or other, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth became more intense. On top of that, the expert from Green Fire World somehow received some cultivation guidance. Hence, the experts in Green Fire World slowly grew. No wonder. In such an outstanding cultivation environment, the palace master of one of the 9 forces is only an eternal real god. Emperor God Xiexin smiled and his smile looked malicious. There was boundless surprise in his eyes too. Great, that's great. Even heaven is helping me. Previously, I found the ancient battlefield that was totally sealed off from eternal chaotic world. Then, I found another big world that possesses great potential. An Emperor God Xiexin naturally could tell the value of Green Fire World. Although Green Fire World had yet to develop, it was like a newborn baby. It required time to slowly grow. Once it was fully grown, it was simply unimaginable how great of a level it would reach. Emperor God Xiexin found out about the situation of Green Fire World and instantly had many wicked ideas pop into his head. Conquer Green Fire World and make Green Fire World into his private backyard. Let's go. Let's head to Green Fire World. Emperor God Xiexin immediately forced the 3 disciples from Immortal Palace to lead the way to Green Fire World. In the beginning, he was worried about the standard of the experts in Green Fire World. But now, he didn't care much. Even Palace Master from the 9 strongest forces was merely eternal real god level. The so-called Supreme Wushuang City Master couldn't be that powerful. From Emperor God Xiexin's point of view, Wushuang City Master would at most be a chaotic real god. He reckoned that he shouldn't be the top among chaotic real gods as well. As for Almighty, Emperor God Xiexin didn't consider that at all. There weren't many Almighties from eternal chaotic world. It wasn't a level that one could easily achieve. Even if Wushuang's city master had already broken through and become an almighty, he wouldn't care. One should know that he was an emperor god. Plus, as he had wandered in the ancient battlefield for over 12,000 years, he was very powerful. Hence, he didn't bother much. Just a green fire world, he could overtake it easily alone. Very soon, Emperor God had reached the entrance of Green Fire World and Green Fire Palace under the lead of the disciples from Immortal Palace. 1949 Outsider in Wushuang City. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat alone with his eyes closed. He had been cultivating in seclusion for the past 12,000 years. He broke 7 stars previously and they was all recovered. His power had resumed its peak. Not only that, his comprehension of doctrine improved tremendously as well. Both space-time doctrine and reincarnation doctrine had already reached the extreme limit of the 8th level in Doctrine Palace. In terms of sword principle, he had also had a breakthrough. The current me has improved tremendously in my overall power, but it is a pity that I will never step out to the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, Chaotic Supreme. Since he had received the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, he had been studying it. He had been figuring out ways to break through. He had already put in painstaking effort, but he felt that he was just slightly away from breakthrough. The slight bit was just like a layer of window paper. With just one poke, it would break. However, the window paper required a great opportunity. Hence, Jian Wushuang tried to keep himself composed. Just then, Jian Wushuang was surprised and he opened his eyes. His figure moved and he left the secret room. In the lofty discussion hall in Wushuang City. Vroom. Jian Wushuang's body appeared on the highest throne out of nowhere. Father, Brother Wang Yuan, 4th brother, what's the matter? Why are you in a hurry to see me? Jian Wushuang looked at the 3 of them next to him. He said before he had started cultivating in seclusion. Unless it was something very urgent, one shouldn't interrupt him when he cultivated. There's something urgent. Jian Nanshan's face grew grave. Let me break this to you, Wang Yuan said directly. 3rd brother, there's an outsider in Green Fire World. Outsider? Jian Wushuang immediately looked distressed. Green Fire World and the entire ancient battlefield was under the cover of the Great Formation. Without the permission of the higher-ups in Green Fire Palace, no one could barge in as they wished. In such a situation, there were outsiders in Green Fire World. Either he is an expert in a deep sleep in the ancient battlefield, or he is an expert from eternal chaotic world who came to the battlefield through the space gap in ancient Mysteryland by luck, just like King Jiyu Tong back then, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. How's the power of this outsider? Jian Wushuang asked. Very powerful. Terrifyingly powerful, Wang Yuan said solemnly. Green Fire World grew over the years and our power is way beyond what it was in the past. There are many cultivators who have already reached the level of a real god. However, the outsider just stood there and many of our real gods didn't even have the guts to fight back. If I am not mistaken, he should have reached the almighty level that you mentioned. Almighty? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. The outsider seems to have understood the history of Green Fire World. He came and attacked Green Fire Palace with thunderous measures. Green Fire Palace couldn't resist at all. We sent out the few Dao soldiers that you left behind. However, with the few Dao soldiers joining forces, he still defeated them with ease, Wang Yuan said. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. The few Dao soldiers that he left in Green Fire Palace were merely ordinary bronze-armored Dao soldiers. Theoretically, the few Dao soldiers joining forces could easily match a Sir God evenly. In the end, they were defeated with ease. The enemy was at least a top Sir God or Emperor God. Do you have any mirror image of him fighting with the Dao soldiers? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, I ordered someone to record them. Su Ru stood up and took out a token. Su Ru waved and a huge mirror image immediately appeared in the void. In the mirror image, the outsider fought with the few Dao soldiers. A total of 4 Dao soldiers were fighting all out, but in the end, the malicious-looking young man only attacked casually and suppressed the 4 Dao soldiers easily. When Jian Wushuang saw the malicious-looking young man in the image, his eyes dilated in shock. It's him. Jian Wushuang recognized the malicious-looking young man. There were many experts in eternal chaotic world. There were many almighties among them. Any almighty who was famous, Jian Wushuang paid attention to them. The malicious-looking young man in the image was an emperor god. Jian Wushuang naturally knew him. Emperor god Xiexin. He came to Green Fire World? Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold. Emperor god Xiexin had been wandering in the ancient mystery land. As he appeared there, no doubt, he had definitely come through the space gap in ancient mystery land. Luckily, it was only an emperor god who barged in unintentionally, and he isn't that powerful. He is well within my power to deal with. If it was really an ancient experts, it'd be real trouble. Jian Wushuang let out a breath of relief. Emperor god Xiexin's power was ordinary, so Jian Wushuang could deal with him. If it were to be an ancient expert who had woken up from the ancient battlefield, that would be true trouble. An ancient expert, even the weakest one, wouldn't be one that Jian Wushuang could easily deal with once he resumed his peak fighting power. Third brother, you know this outsider? Wang Yuan asked. Never met him, but I know his background. So, what happened after? Jian Wushuang asked again. The outsider's intention is obviously to conquer Green Fire World. Hence, after he defeated the few Dao soldiers and revealed his power, he didn't massacre the higher-ups in Green Fire World, but he left a message. He said that he would give us 1 month's time to consider. 1 month later, if Green Fire World and the 9 top forces in Green Fire World do not yield to him, he will kill all of us one by one. Besides, he even brought up you, third brother. Wang Yuan looked at Jian Wushuang. Oh. What did he say? Jian Wushuang looked cold. He knows that third brother, Wushuang City Master, is widely acknowledged as the strongest person, and your word carries great weight. Hence, he said to let you go and see him. Wang Yuan said. For me to see him? He. Emperor god Xiexin has guts. Jian Wushuang sneered, but he understood. I reckon Emperor god Xiexin doesn't know my identity. Jian Wushuang knew just how famous he was in eternal chaotic world. Even great emperor had scruples, let alone just Emperor god Xiexin. However, Emperor god Xiexin didn't care about him, but had relayed a message for Wushuang City Master to see him personally. He definitely didn't know Wushuang City Master's true identity. Emperor god Xiexin probably only knew that the strongest person in Green Fire World was Wushuang City Master, but he didn't know the true name of the Wushuang City Master. If Emperor god Xiexin knew, forget about his mad behavior, he would have run away from Green Fire World long ago. Where's this outsider now? Jian Wushuang asked. He's in the palace floating outside Green Fire Palace, Wang Yuan answered. 1950 Wushuang City Master arrived very well. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly while he put on a playful smile. Third brother, what are you going to do? Wang Yuan looked at him. What to do? As Emperor god Xiexin wants me to go and see him, I shall grant his wish. Jian Wushuang sneered, but his smile was as cold as a blade. On that very day, Jian Wushuang departed from Wushuang City and came before the palaces floating outside Green Fire Palace. In the palace, right in the middle of the palaces, the malicious-looking Emperor god Xiexin was sitting on a grand throne casually, while the cultivator from Green Fire World stood below in reverence. Most of the cultivators from Green Fire World had reached real god level. Then, there were a few real gods who were nodding and bowing with ingratiating smiles on their faces. Previously, when Emperor god Xiexin had barged into Green Fire Palace, he had suppressed the entire Green Fire Palace alone and also the 9 top forces in Green Fire World. The news had spread like wildfire. Naturally, it caught the attention of the experts who were suppressed by Green Fire Palace and the 9 top forces. They had approached him to seek his backing. Then, there were a bunch of people gathered under the command of Emperor god Xiexin. Mr. Emperor God, according to the news that I've gotten, the higher-ups of the top 9 forces are gathered at Green Fire Palace. I reckon they are thinking of countermeasures. Besides, there were experts from Green Fire Palace who requested Wushuang City Master to get involved, a purple-haired elder reported politely. Mr. Emperor God, you don't have to go through the trouble. You can totally wipe out Green Fire Palace directly, as well as the top 9 forces. Then, build another brand new force to unite Green Fire World. Wouldn't that be easier? Yeah. Green Fire Palace and the 9 top forces, although they could agree to yield to you because of fear towards I reckon it would only be temporary. They are not trustworthy. The few of them started commenting. No matter if it was within an ordinary sect or force, there would be some traitors, let alone when they were in a big world. The few real gods at the scene were traitors of Green Fire World. They knew that Emperor God Xiexin was an outsider, but they revolted and went to his side without hesitation for their own benefit. Plus, they had been urging Emperor God Xiexin to wipe out Green Fire Palace and the 9 top forces. Because the few of them most likely had been suppressed by Green Fire Palace and the 9 top forces once. On the highest throne, Emperor God Xiexin tapped the armrest with a malicious smile plastered across his face. I want a complete Green Fire World. Just like how the current structure with Green Fire Palace and 9 top forces are great. There's no need to wipe them out. What I want to do now is to replace Wushuang City Master so that the cultivators in Green Fire World take me as the strongest person, treat me as a god. That'll be enough. Of course, if they don't act wisely, they can't blame me. The few real gods were unhappy but didn't talk anymore. Then, a figure in a black robe walked in and bowed at Emperor God Xiexin. Mr. Emperor God, Wushuang City Master is here. Oh. Emperor God Xiexin raised his eyebrows. Wushuang City Master. The few real gods gasped a breath of cold air. They were born in Green Fire World. They knew the legends about Wushuang City Master. Wushuang City Master was totally a legend in Green Fire World. Any single person couldn't help but reveal reverence and worship when they bring up Wushuang City Master. Although the few real gods had already switched allegiance to Emperor God Xiexin, they were still fearful of the legendary Wushuang City Master from the bottom of their hearts. However, the moment they recalled Emperor God Xiexin's power, the few real gods felt reassured. Humph, at least Wushuang City Master is smart enough. Of course, no matter how high his position is in Green Fire World, he is just a real god after all. How could he be compared to an emperor god favorably? From what I can see, Wushuang City Master is definitely panicking. He must be afraid that Mr. Emperor God will kill him later. What Wushuang City Master? He's nothing before Mr. Emperor God. The few real gods continued to praise him. Emperor God Xiexin sneered, Wushuang City Master ain't that dumb, let him wait outside for a bit. Yes, the man in the black robe who came to send the message turned to leave. Outside the palaces, there were a few figures standing side by side. In Green Fire Palace that was not too far away, there were many higher-ups from Green Fire World who were paying attention. The higher-ups from the 9 top forces were standing there as they watched too. Most of them were anxious. Although Jian Wushuang had saved Green Fire World more than once and there was no doubt about his power, the cultivators in Green Fire World weren't like before. They could tell that Jian Wushuang was only a real god. However, the outsider Emperor God Xiexin was the legendary Almighty. It was said that the top of the pyramid in the outside world. Between real gods and almighties, the difference was ridiculously huge. Hence, although they were absolutely obliged to Jian Wushuang, they were still extremely worried. Mr. Emperor God tell you to wait here. The man in a black robe who had come to send the message was arrogant. He was unprecedentedly excited too because he knew that those standing before him were the expert higher-ups from Green Fire World and also the legendary Wushuang City Master. To block Wushuang City Master outside the door and make him wait, he had never thought about it before. He wants us to wait here. The bee starred. Wang Yuan immediately cursed with anger. No hurry. As he wants to put on airs, I will let him do it. I wonder how is he going to end this later. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly but didn't care much. Qiu Yu, who was next to Jian Wushuang, shook her head slightly. She started to pity Emperor God Xiexin, who didn't know how high the sky was. Jian Wushuang didn't wait for long. There was finally movement among the palaces. Emperor God Xiexin flew over with a few real gods surrounding him. Rumble. There was vast divine might spreading out from Emperor God Xiexin as he pressed the earth. He had yet to arrive, but his voice reverberated through the universe. Among you, who is Wushuang City Master? Emperor God Xiexin's voice was cold with a tinge of a high and mighty aura. He put his hands behind his back as he stood in the void above. He surveyed everyone beneath him. He came before Jian Wushuang, but he didn't bother to look at Jian Wushuang. He heard from the real god under his command that Wushuang's city master was only a real god. Just a real god wasn't worth him taking a look at.